Ben 10 is good at a lot of things. This includes entertaining stories, world building, animation, and also fumbling characters. If there's one thing the Ben 10 series is really good at, it's mishandling certain aspects of the series, and characters is probably the prime example of that. There are a ton of characters who either don't get enough to really show off how great they are, or they start off as great and then they end up being misused or forgotten entirely. There is one character specifically that was mistreated so badly it actually kind of aggravates me. That character is Julie Yamamoto. First being introduced in Alien Force, Julie Yamamoto is the most notable love interest of Ben Tennyson. She starts off as a normal girl but ends up getting some pretty good development later down the road, and then ends up being the victim of things such as mishandling or shitty decisions throughout the franchise. In this video, I want to talk about why Julie is iconic and deserves so much better than what she got at the eventual end of the series. As I mentioned, Julie is the most notable love interest of Ben, first appearing in Ben 10 Returns Part 1 for one scene where her and Ben meet for the first time. She would eventually become a somewhat mainstay as she would appear in a lot of episodes throughout the UAF era. So what exactly makes Julie iconic? Well, similar to my Alien videos, let's start off with her actual character design. Since Julie's a human and not an Omnitrix alien or anything, I'm not expecting her to be this super crazy design, but I do like one thing about her design that kind of stands out. Besides Gwen's magic and I guess Chromastone, there's not a lot of pink in the Ben 10 franchise, so seeing her wear pink is pretty cool. As far as her debut goes, there's not really much to talk about. She watches Ben play soccer and then congratulates him at the end of the game. All we really know about her from the debut is her name, and that's about it. But you can tell just from this that the two will develop a friendship and possible romance. So unlike my Alien videos where I go in order of appearance for the most part, I'm actually going to go a bit of out of order here and instead describe Julie based off her keywords that describe her rather than her chronological appearances. This may seem disorganized for some, but for me, it's saving time. Although I do want to talk about her first proper introduction. In fact, her proper introduction episode, Peer Pressure, does a pretty good job at exemplifying everything that makes Julie who she is. This episode showcases her loyalty, her kindness, her understanding, her patience, and just the fact that she's cool and has a bit of dimension to her. The only thing that I do like about Julie that's not in this episode is her competitive nature, but we'll see more of that later on throughout the show. Her next appearance, which is more of her proper debut and introduction, is in the episode Peer Pressure. In this episode, Ben finally works up the courage to ask Julie out on a date at the pier. I know everyone brings up how Ben is really nervous and how this conversation feels incredibly human, but there's a few things I want to highlight from Julie's perspective as well. One thing I love is that Julie has this snarkiness about her. There are times where she'll make very quick comebacks, and I just really love that about her.
Back so soon? He studies and I come over to help him review. Not that he's actually acing the reviews.
I'm getting better.
You're making a real effort.
How did you know that would work?
You're not the only one who's seen brain stealers from outer space.
I also love the fact that she clearly can see that Ben is like struggling and asks Gwen for advice and stuff right in front of her, but she doesn't care because Julie is incredibly understanding, and we're gonna see more of why that she's just such an understanding and kind person who deserves so much better. I won't go over every single detail of this episode because that's for another day, but I will just say that I absolutely adore this episode. Not only because it's just a fun and great time, but also because it just really shows how great Ben and Julie's relationship used to be. Now, while this whole video isn't just specifically about their relationship, I do want to highlight that I love how they form a romance here. Of course, the most important part is when Ben reveals he could turn into aliens to Julie. The very first reaction Julie has is so important to me, where she just finds it incredibly cool. She doesn't question anything, she's not freaked out, she's not put off by Ben at all, she is totally cool with that. Like, she is such an understanding person. I also love that after Bazel is saved from his ship self-destructing, Julie offers help almost instantly. I'll go more into this in a bit, but I just love the fact that Julie's always willing to help out or even try, even when she clearly can't do much. Overall, I love that this episode focuses on aspects of Julie without outright telling us. We don't need to be told that, you know, she's somewhat confident, she can have somewhat of an attitude, that she could somewhat be very understanding and patient. Like, we don't need to be told that. We're just shown that in certain dialogue really exemplifies that. She can be positive, but there's also times where she can also be stressed. We don't need to be outright told this. There are even certain details and facial expressions that I never really noticed that sort of exemplify this. One thing I didn't notice until I recorded footage for this video was that in the car scene where Kevin is embarrassing Ben, not only is Ben peeping his eye out to see Julie's reaction to Kevin's mockery, but Julie smiles at Ben and has totally no issue with what's going on. Like, she's just chill with all this stuff. I love that. Julie in season 1 only appears in these 2 episodes, however season 2 onward uses her a lot more. Now that we've covered all the season 1 appearances of Julie, we're gonna start talking about the points on why Julie's really cool. Let's get a big chunk out of the way by talking about her reliability and kindness. We're gonna start with the first episode Julie appears in after already knowing about Ben's secret, where she's a part of the actual main plot. This is the episode Save save the last dance. This is 100% one of my absolute favorite episodes of the entire franchise. I don't want to go on and on about it, but I'll just say that every character here is just almost borderline perfectly written. Every single little detail I love to death, and that does not exclude Julie. I love how Julie is just so willing to help Ben with a problem that she barely knows anything about. I also love how she can be so empathetic towards Ben to make sure that he doesn't feel alone. I love that. The little jokes with her note-taking is pretty fun, and I love that she's also willing to help even when, again, she can't do anything. Also, this is a small thing, but I love that her and Gwen have time to talk too. I love that Julie has a genuine friendship with Gwen. Like, she isn't just a Ben's girlfriend character, but we'll get to that more in a bit. What I love is that even though Julie can't do much from, say, a fighting standpoint to help out Gwen or Kevin or anything, her main focus in this episode is being an emotional support for Ben. Ben outright says that he feels like he's alone because due to Gwen and Kevin being busy with the school dance, that he doesn't really have anyone to go to, but Julie makes it very abundantly clear that yes he does. She's always there for him, and I like that. And then of course there's her part in the War of the Worlds 2-parter. I love the fact that we don't even have any idea that she's going to be in the episode at all. Like, she's just there by surprise once the whole team is like formed. I love that. Like, it's like, oh shit, Julie's here, and then Ben's all like really nervous about it. But let me tell you, seeing her and Ship like fight in this war, I love it so much. She doesn't do necessarily too much in this, however, I do love seeing how confident she is now fighting off these aliens with Ship by her side. I feel like Julie's definitely the oddball when you think about everyone who's helping out the Alien Force trio. Everyone here has some sort of superpowers, and while yes, Julie does have Ship with her, she's just a regular girl. So the fact that she's so willing to help just shows how reliable she is. And of course, how can I not mention the very cute scene between her and Ben at the end of the episode? And this is just from the first 2 seasons of Alien Force. Season 3 onward still uses her quite a bit, but in Season 3 of Alien Force's case, she gets nowhere near the same amount of screen time. I'll skip the episode about her for now because it goes into another point that I want to get into later, but we will talk about her appearance in Single-Handed. While some can argue her appearance here is just random, I feel like it is important that she's here. Not only is it because she runs into Ben's hand in the park, but also because she helps Gwen keep Ben's hand away from Sunder while Kevin makes that doohickey crap to get Ben back. Again, I want to reiterate that she has like no powers. Ship's not even with her in this episode for whatever reason, and she's still helping out. Maybe this is a weird thing to say, but this is one of my favorite Julie appearances just because it's just fun that she's here. I don't know, I'm weird like that. As far as Ultimate Alien goes, her helpfulness is not nearly the same as it is in Alien Force. In fact, it's quite downplayed actually. Like, she appears a good amount of times and she has episodes about her, but in terms of actual helpfulness, I can only think of a handful of times. I can't talk about too many of her Ultimate Alien appearances because it goes into a whole other point that you clearly know if you're a longtime fan, but there are still some episodes that showcase her reliability. For example, in Absolute Power Part 2, she comes out of nowhere to save Gwen from Ultimate Kevin, and that's pretty cool that she got to appear even if she wasn't necessarily needed or even seemed like she would appear at all during the Ultimate Kevin arc. In both Revenge of the Swarm and The Perfect Girlfriend, she talks Elena out of killing Ben, and speaking of talking people out of things, in the Ultimate Alien finale, her along with Gwen and Kevin talk Ben out of being corrupt with power. Most of her positive appearances in Ultimate Alien feel like more like glorified guest appearances, which isn't a bad thing. I just want to stress that because I do love seeing her in these episodes. As I mentioned before, Julie is an incredibly caring person. Of course, she cares about Ben being her love interest and stuff, but she cares about other people too, and I like that it's not just limited to Ben. Of course, she cares for Gwen and Kevin, showing concern and wanting to help when able to. And how could I not mention about Julie being caring without mentioning Ship? For anyone who doesn't watch the show but wanted to watch this video for whatever reason, Ship is Julie's pet. And I honestly really love seeing the two bond together when they're playing and Ship's doing his tricks, or when Ship is very protective of Julie. One thing that goes hand in hand with Julie's caringness and helpfulness is her bravery. Something about her I feel like no one really talks about. It's one thing when you're okay with your boyfriend being able to turn into aliens, but being willing to fight in a galactic war with him? That's pretty cool. There are times where she fights with Ship, which I'll get to later on. I know I didn't talk about that, but we'll get to it. But there are times where she fights without Ship, and she's still doing pretty well, for the most part. Like in Pet Project when she beats up Forever Knight for a second, and she has a lot of fun doing it. Look at her, she looks so happy, I love it. And in Greetings from Tekadon, she tries to beat up a Tekadon with a golf club. This is more so stupidity than bravery in some ways, but they both kind of go hand in hand at times, let's be honest. Another moment where she shows off her bravery is in Pet Project, where she goes right up to Ship, who's being controlled at the moment, and try to talk some sense into him. Even though a million projectiles are being aimed at her, she does not care. She is so brave and all she wants to do is protect Ship because she loves him that much. Powers or not, she is always willing to face danger and help out her friends. I already gave the major examples of Julie's snarkiness, but I do want to talk about her competitive nature. Julie is a very passionate person, taking up the passion of tennis. This may be unintentional, but I'm still going to bring attention to it. In the first episode we see her actually play tennis in peer pressure. It's in a small little court. That's all fine and stuff. But in Duped, when she's actually playing in tournaments and stuff, it's a big stadium. It shows a little bit of growth without telling us that Julie's just gotten better at tennis, and in the Flamekeeper circle, a rank for her is even mentioned, which is a pretty impressive one too. Julie isn't just competitive in tennis. In Greetings from Tekadon, Julie's pissed off when Ben effortlessly uses Brainstorm to get a hole-in-one to win automatically. I feel like this small line, even though it's such a minor thing, solidified why I love Julie so much.
According to this, there are 2 miniature golf courses within 20 miles of here. When's good for you?
I kinda thought we'd focus on the killer robot.
When's good for you?
I haven't brought attention to it yet, but Julie is voiced by Vivian Pam, and she does a great job with the character. She does a pretty good job at conveying whatever emotion that Julie's supposed to be feeling at that moment, whether it's happiness, sadness, or agitation.
Yes, I do. I'm dealing with a person who is incredibly mean to poor little Ship, and who obviously does not trust me. You're not alone. You've got me. It's not funny, Kevin! Sometimes friendships end. And maybe that's the way it's supposed to be.
And one thing I like is that Julie isn't a complete saint. While she absolutely has a right to be, so I'm not implying that she doesn't, but she grows very jealous of Jennifer Nocturne in Hero Time. And can you blame her? She got to kiss Ben before she actually does. Like, that's crazy to me. Like, it didn't even dawn on me as a kid, but our first kiss for Ben is from fucking Jennifer Nocturne, a character we met not even like 2 fucking minutes ago. And the only time we get a Julie kiss, like, that's not in like any sort of spin-off non-canon bullshit, is the finale, and it's like really quick, and then it's like, that's it. That's all we get. There's a scene where she's basically playing tennis very aggressively, like she is pissed. I love seeing that because she's not just happy and like go lucky and positive all the time. She can be angry when she wants to be. And despite all this, to go back to her kindness, she still worries about Jennifer when she thinks that no one was there to save her when Goop saves Julie instead of Jennifer. And while it's not as severe as Jennifer, Julie shows envy towards Elena Validus. And look at the way her eyes move here. Girl, are you Mio Akiyama or something? Julie can be incredibly intelligent. It's mentioned in Save the Last Dance by Ben that she always gets straight A's, and in Good Copy Bad Copy, not only does she help Ben study, but she also gets an A at the end of the episode. She also could help with figuring solutions to things, such as figuring out what the hell those Guardians were after in Eye of the Beholder. And as shown in episodes like Don't Fear the Reapo, Julie can be very clever, telling Ship not to fight the Vreedles so they don't see how valuable he is. Everything I've mentioned so far has been very positive things about Julie. Now it's time, I think, we finally start talking about the downfall. We might as well get the biggest chunk out of the way now, Ben and Julie's relationship. What started off as pretty great ends up becoming very toxic by the end of Ultimate Alien. Episodes where they have conflicts aren't necessarily bad on paper. I think if Ben and Julie were just happy and all lovey-dovey all the time or something, it wouldn't be entertaining. Not to say that I want to see, toxicity in relationships or anything. That's what made shows like Total Drama World Tour or Regular Show a bit of a drag to get through in certain points. But the way it's handled here is pretty bad. Before we get into the major bad stuff, I do want to talk about one episode where Ben and Julie have a conflict, but it's actually not that bad at all, and that's the Alien Force episode, Pet Project. Also, this has nothing to do with Ben and Julie's relationship in this episode, but I do want to talk about it very quickly, that the beginning of this episode, bro, I was like recording, and I just see Julie smiling with Ship, and I just think to myself, how the fuck could Ben ever hurt this smile? Also, I just gotta point out, like, turning to a fucking submarine in the yard, does no one give any shit in the UAF era? Like, holy fuck, man. This is the first episode to put Ben and Julie in some sort of a conflict, as the two have a bit of an argument regarding Ship. Now, you're probably guessing that this episode's probably pretty bad because of it, like certain episodes in Ultimate Alien, but I would say no. While Ben does come off as a bit of a dick in this episode, it's not nearly to the same extent. Not only that, but Ben has a bit more of an emotional understanding in this episode. When him and Julie argue in Kevin's car, he notices Kevin and Gwen watching them, and realizes now's not the best time to have any sort of argument like this, and he points it out, which I like. And from Julie's perspective, I love that she has a backbone here. She knows that she's valid and that Ben is being unrealistically mean to Ship for no reason at all. When Ben tells her to stay put because she doesn't believe that she could do any help, she says, fuck that, and I'm coming whether you like it or not. And I love that about her. Like, she does not care. If she wants to help, she is going to help. It's such a small moment, but I feel like it's such a great moment for Julie that I just love highlighting it. Also, this is a minor thing, but when Ben's caught up in a lie saying that he had homework when he was actually watching a zombie movie, there's no like whole big fight about it. It's just like a, busted, haha, let's laugh about it for a second moment. So, refreshing compared to what what Ultimate Alien's gonna do. Thankfully, Alien Force doesn't have too many Ben and Julie conflict episodes. In fact, there's only really 2 of them, honestly, Pet Project being clearly the better of the 2. As for that other episode, it was one that I skipped when talking about most of the moments for Julie, and that is the episode Don't Fear the Reapo, or Vreedle, whatever you prefer. This episode, like Pet Project, has Ben and Julie in somewhat of a conflict due to ship. They even have like a whole segment where they try to do like a whole boys versus girls thing, and it's meh. It's really not the worst thing in the world, like, honestly, but again, Ben comes off as kind of a dick. What really bothers me here is that I didn't feel like Ben learned his lesson from Pet Project. He does not show any sort of sentiment or care for ship at all.
We're not going to let them take you.
Somebody could use him as a weapon.
And you don't want Julie to lose her pet either, right, Ben?
Oh, sure. That too.
That sounded sincere.
Also, Ben not understanding why Julie cares about Ship is so baffling to me. Besides the fact that Ship is basically Julie's pet, and obviously someone would love their pet, like Kevin points out, Julie and Ben find Ship on their first date. There's a special memory tied to that. I feel like early Alien Force Ben would understand that, but since we're dealing with Season 3 Ben, yeah, he's gonna be kind of an asshole. This is far from the worst that Ben and Julie's relationship will deal with, but I do want to point out one more thing about this episode, specifically in terms of their relationship, and that is the weird, uncomfortable ending. For some reason, there's like a few episodes that have this weird vibe when it ends, like the final line and everything, and they play the music like, oh, it's so sweet, but am I not the only one off-put by this ending?
Yeah, thanks. But, you know, it kind of feels like you're putting a lot of pressure on our relationship.
It's just a dog, Ben.
Both Pet Project and Don't Fear the Reapo aren't necessarily that bad in perspective, especially when you compare it to the Ultimate Alien stuff, but even on their own, it's honestly harmless at worst. But now let's move on to Ultimate Alien, the real chunk of the disrespect that Julie deals with. And now it's finally time to talk about Duped. This is the first episode in Ultimate Alien that has Ben and Julie in some sort of conflict, and there's a few things I want to point out. No one really points out about this specific episode. But let's start with the basic stuff. The whole premise of this episode, which is so ridiculous. I feel like I'm about to start talking about my issues with the episode entirely instead of just Ben and Julie's relationship, but this episode is incredibly infamous for good reason. This episode has almost everyone at their worst. They're either a complete jerk or very stupid. The only people who I feel like are 100% valid here is Julie, of course, and then honestly Kevin for the most part. If you're fortunate enough not to know about this episode, the plot of this episode has it where Ben was late to Julie's tennis match due to some forever nights, and Julie and everyone else is mad at him for it. Gwen makes a comment about being in 2 places at once, which gives Ben the idea to go Echo Echo, set his Ultimatrix to human, and boom, there you go. There's just 3 Bens roaming around. I'm not even going to address, for the most part, the whole bunch of questions that would be formed just for the fact that the Ultimatrix can do this, or like, how it works, but whatever. The main issue here, like I said, is the stupidity. There are 3 Bens with different personalities. You have regular Ben, who's still himself for the most part, then you have an emotional, understanding Ben, and an arrogant and obnoxious Ben. The 3 things Ben wants to do here are set as this: go to Julie's tennis match since she's in a big tournament, help Kevin investigate Forever Nights, and watch a Sumo Slammer movie. So, first off, you're a world-famous superhero. Couldn't you just get to see the movie anytime you want? Just be like, hey, hook me up, I saved your ass last Thursday. Like, couldn't you just do that? Not only that, but it's a fucking movie. I'm sure you can see that any other time. Second, I can understand where Ben comes from when wanting to deal with the Forever Nights. If people are in danger, I can understand why you want to save them. But the problem is that he tries to play it off as like he doesn't know Julie's upset. Like, he goes there like, oh, good game, and like, you were there for like, what, not even 10 seconds of it? Like, come on. Not even like an apology at first. He has to be told by Gwen to do that. Like, that's ridiculous. Another thing is, you have an emotional understanding Ben and an arrogant Ben. So why the fuck is emotional understanding Ben going with Kevin and arrogant Ben going to Julie? Of course arrogant Ben is gonna make a complete dick of himself. Watching these scenes is just so fucking, like, bro, it makes my stomach turn. My stomach turns into fucking Gygas from Earthbound every time I have to witness a single scene of this episode. And if that wasn't bad enough, at the end of the episode, Ben outright just admits, oh yeah, I went to go see the movie instead of watching your tournament play. And like, Julie was so forgiving here, and yet he still fucking did that, and the episode just ends that way. That's fucking crazy to me. Oh, no, and it gets worse. This episode, in case you don't know, was the 100th episode of Ben 10. Like, the 100th episode overall, and this is what they fucking do. They botch a really zany idea, they have everyone almost written like a complete stupid dickhead, and Julie just gets done so dirty here. And this might be a little worse to me in some aspects, but the fact that this is the second episode of Ultimate Alien entirely is a little worse than the fact that's the 100th episode, because this is the second episode of your third show, so that's such a weird like vibe to have as a first impression. Like, let's say you've never seen Ben 10 and for whatever reason you want to start with Ultimate Alien. Imagine you're just watching the first 3 episodes and this is your second episode? I would be worried as shit that this episode is going to be complete fucking dog shit. Another thing that makes it worse is the episode prior, Fame, which is actually pretty good. To me, this is one of the last times we ever get to see Ben and Julie in a positive relationship. After Ben's identity is found out, Julie gives him shelter at her place so there's no news around. And she also gives him encouragement at the end of the episode and a kiss on the cheek. That is so nice. It makes it feel like, hey, after Alien Force Season 3, we're gonna have good Ben and Julie again. But nope, we get duped and other bullshit later down the road. Not every episode after dupe is necessarily bad, but most of the episodes that aren't that bad are just minor appearances for Julie, to be honest. The next episode Julie will appear in is Hero Time. This episode is not nearly as bad as duped. Not that it's hard to achieve that, but I still feel like I should point it out anyway. I like this episode for Julie for the most part, but there is one flaw that I didn't mention when I was talking about her moments in this episode earlier, and that is her forgiving nature. Julie is very forgiving to a fault. The shit she forgives Ben for is crazy to me. At the same time, I do want to highlight that Julie is also pretty trusting because she knows Ben wouldn't necessarily want to cheat or anything, mostly, but we'll get there. But I do like that Julie's anger is mostly towards Jennifer. If a famous movie star tried to hit on my significant other, yeah, I'd be a little annoyed too, especially with that kiss. Also, something I kind of forgot about, okay, so I was rewatching the episode to make sure I didn't miss any points, and when Julie's like really mad about Jennifer, she's playing tennis all aggressive and jealous and everything, when someone like taps her shoulder and just says her name, her first instinct is just to fucking whack him on the head with a tennis racket. Like, you wouldn't even know who the fuck that was. Like, you could have fucking really injured someone. Another example of her being forgiving to a fault is in the episode The Perfect Girlfriend. In this episode, Ben and Gwen drop off Julie at an airport because she's going to Europe for a tennis tournament. But before Ben and Julie could go into the airport, there's a distress call about Serpent. Instead of like having Gwen fight Serpent or something, Ben abandons Julie instead of giving a proper goodbye and goes to fight off Serpent. I guess a counter argument could be that Gwen and Kevin got their asses whooped by Serpent the first time they fought them, but a lot of time has passed and they've probably gotten stronger. I feel like they could deal from now. What sucks here is Ben doesn't seem very considerate of Julie's feelings. He even tells Julie to come along with him. Like, are you fucking serious, man? Again, I do like that Julie has a backbone and she says, well, I have a life too and this is important to me, so if you want to go do your hero thing, fine, but leave me out of it. And after a few days, Julie comes back being like, oh, let's spend time together. Like, she's happy and like she's not mad at Ben. Like, you're not even like the least bit upset. I'm sure she had time to think over and stuff, so there's that. And we'll see later on that Julie's always been very understanding of the fact that Ben's a hero, but still, like, I feel like Ben should at least be told off a little more. I don't know. Now, that isn't always to say that Julie's in the right. There's one episode where she actually is in the wrong, and that's the episode Flamekeeper Circle. In this episode, Julie gets manipulated to join a cult, which is a very funny sentence to tell people who have no knowledge of this franchise. Ben and Kevin both try to talk Julie out of it, and Ben specifically is very obnoxious about it. Even though he's in the right here, the way he goes about it is pretty disrespectful, invalidating stuff like her tennis ranking. But even with that in mind, Julie is still more in the wrong in this episode. Like, there's a scene that kind of baffles me, and it never fazed me as a kid, but she's willing to pretend to be a hostage to Ben. Like, that's kind of fucked up. But at the very least, she does realize, oh shit, this place is very sketchy, and, you know, she believes Ben in the end, so there's that at least. Even if her turnaround against the Esoterica is, like, really rushed, like, I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of a mess of an episode, even if I still enjoy it. The biggest problem with Ben and Julie's relationship is mostly Ben. His inconsideration and outright selfishness is very obnoxious. While Julie can be stubborn, she is a lot more considerate and understanding of Ben than Ben is of her. The last episode we have to talk about for Ultimate Alien in terms of her disrespect for now is Eye of the Beholder. This whole episode, like Duped, is just a complete shit show. Similar to Duped, Ben is ignorant and an absolute asshole in this episode. Julie just goes through it this entire episode. Julie asks Ben for help after her ship just runs off, and Ben's just very passive-aggressive to her. I get it, she's interrupting a battle and that, you know, she could wait, but at the same time, it's like, Ben, you could be a little nicer, you know? I feel like Ben doesn't even try in this episode. Like, there's a scene where, like, he's like, oh, I'm trying to help, I want to be your friend, yada yada. And then the next moment, he's just like, okay, Bazel, What are you gonna do? Sell ship? Like, what the fuck? Also, this wasn't Ben's doing, but I never noticed, but Julie's about to cry in this scene, and that makes me so sad. Like, that breaks my heart. The end of this episode has them reconciling and everything, but like, it just doesn't feel earned at all. Like I said, Julie is forgiving to a fault. To Ben's credit, in the next appearance, Revenge of the Swarm, Ben does show a little bit of effort, actually wanting to make time for Julie. He even passes up on investigating because he made an obligation to Julie, so that's nice at least. What's not nice though is two moments in Ultimate Alien that show off Ben and some of his worst. In the very same episode, Ben and Elena almost kiss. Yes, Ben does try to push away at Elena's advances at first.
I'm so glad we're going to be together now.
Working together, Elena.
But almost immediately after, Ben and Elena almost kiss, and if it wasn't for Julie interrupting, they would have. The other moment is in the transmogrification of Eunice. Now, Ben does mention being on a break with Julie, but we find out in the next episode, Eye of the Beholder, that was all miscommunication, which we'll get to later. But all you need to know is that Ben has this really rushed, weird, controversial romance with a character named Eunice because by technicality, these two are related, which I'll give credit, I think in this episode only, Ben is not aware of that and it was supposed to be randomized DNA, but then Omniverse just says, nope, they're related, but that's a whole can of worms, I'm not opening that, fuck that. There is one moment of disrespect I'm not going to bring up just yet because I want to talk about that along with the rest of her Omniverse appearances as a whole, so you already know where I'm getting at, but we will get there. I'm going to backtrack a little bit and talk about another aspect I like about Julie. The fact that she's kind of like an unofficial fourth main character. She really should have been a main character by Ultimate Alien. Besides the fact that she's Ben's love interest and just overall very entertaining, she has a nice dynamic with Gwen and Kevin as well. More so with Gwen than Kevin, of course, as they're both very good friends. I already talked about how they have a nice conversation in Save the Last Dance, but there's other moments too, such as in Pet Project where the two plan to go to the mall together. Not only that, but Gwen is just always there for Julie when Ben fails to be. Even though Gwen is a bit irrational and duped, she does stick up for Julie, which I like. One of my favorite moments between Julie and Gwen is in The Perfect Girlfriend. I know it's technically Elena Gwen's talking to, but Gwen doesn't know this. But basically, I love how Gwen is so supportive of Julie's goals. Gwen really shows some concern for Julie when she decides to suddenly skip her tournament just to spend time with Ben. In fact, the entire episode has a bit of a parallel between both Ben and Julie's relationship and Gwen and Kevin's. How Gwen and Kevin have a pretty healthy way of communicating, while Ben and Julie clearly don't. And while Julie and Kevin don't have that much interactions, Julie still shows concern for Kevin when he's hurt, and I do like that Kevin sticks up for Julie as well, such as in Eye of the Beholder.
I flew halfway across the galaxy so Julie could tell me to buzz off again? I don't deserve this. I'm a world-famous hero.
You're a world-famous jerk, and if you weren't such a jerk, maybe she wouldn't have dumped you in the first place.
Oh, and now you're the expert on feelings?
No, but I am an expert on jerks.
I also like that she makes a bunch of appearances that aren't necessarily important. She doesn't always have to be a part of the main plot. For example, in Good Copy, Bad Copy, there's no reason necessarily for her to be there, but she's there anyway helping Ben study. Another moment is like in Final Battle Part 1, where she makes a cameo. There's also her little rage moment in Greetings from Tekadon, which is easily one of my favorite small appearances of Julie. Seriously, she would kill it as a rage streamer. Now I'm just imagining her like as a low-tier god type of streamer. She's like seeing Ben and Kai together in Omniverse, and she's just like, mods? Feed her to a LeBowen. I also enjoyed her appearance in Inspector 13. She tags along for the adventure, but she doesn't really do much in this episode, but it's still enjoyable to see her here. Now, I don't think that they ever planned for Julie to be like an unofficial main character, but she's easily one of the most iconic and most prevalent supporting characters. Now, if her dynamic as a love interest for Ben or being a good friend to Gwen and Kevin wasn't enough, she isn't completely useless when it comes to battle. Besides the fact that she's athletic and actually does hold her own in a fight sometimes, she also has Ship by her side. In the episode Don't Fear the Repo, Julie uses Ship as battle armor for the first time. In a way, I feel like they kind of set up the idea of Julie being in more battles. We only get to see the Ship battle armor a handful of times, which is a shame because it looks pretty cool and does some pretty cool stuff too. I learned this not too long ago, but there was also talk of a figure for Julie, but it never came to be, and I was wondering if it was going to be like a regular Julie figure or one with her in the Ship battle armor, or maybe both. At the very least, in 2024, we finally did get a little bit of merch for her, and I don't have it myself, but man do I want this. Another potential idea they could have if Julie was a main character was show her frustration and hard work. In the episode Inspector 13, Julie says something that I feel like really highlights something about her character not enough people acknowledge.
Not everybody has alien powers, Ben. Some of us have to practice, practice, practice.
Another example is in Greetings from Tekkadan. In fact, Gwen even tells Ben outright that Julie's frustrated how easy Ben has it at succeeding at things.
Julie's super competitive.
She's a tennis pro. Of course she's super competitive. But that's not the reason she's mad.
If I don't ask why, you're going to tell me anyway, aren't you?
It's the way you won. Everything comes too easily for you. You always win.
This is gonna sound very dumb of me, but there's a few parallels that I never noticed before. First off, these two are kinda similar in terms of their goofiness, and I got that mostly from this one frame of Single-Handed. That's like what made me realize it. Why? I don't know, don't ask, I'm weird. The other, and I'm gonna get somewhere with this, they're both sports people. It's already established that Julie has a passion for tennis, but Ben also plays soccer. We don't get to see it very often, but he does play soccer. Now the reason I'm bringing this up is because think about how much Ben has succeeded. Yes, he obviously works hard and he's a hero, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to invalidate that, but think about how Julie has climbed the ladder in the tennis world. On Twitter, I asked people what they thought of Julie, and one person had this really cool idea of having Julie get her own episode similar to Gwen in It's Not Easy Being Gwen. I would have loved this. I would have loved to see some insight of Julie's outside life when she's not tagging along on Ben's adventures. The only times I could think of where we actually get to see a bit of Julie's outside life, or at least some implications of it, is when she's talking to some unnamed friend in Peer Pressure, and of course how I mentioned how in Peer Pressure we see her at a small little tournament, and then in Duped we see her at a bigger, more professional tournament. I think Julie would have been great on a dynamic perspective, a battle perspective thanks to Ship, and a character development perspective. Regardless of such, it was great to see Julie being a pretty iconic supporting character throughout all of UAF. And now it's time to talk about Julie and how they treat her in Omniverse. So let's start off with the best thing about Julie in Omniverse, her redesign. I'm not sure if I'm in the minority or majority, but I actually really love Julie's Omniverse design. I love the added extra colors on her sweater, and I also love her new hairstyle. Now, as far as her appearances go, we have nowhere near as much to talk about as Alien Force or Ultimate Alien. Despite being one of Ben's most notable love interests and being one of the most important supporting characters, Julie only has 2 main appearances in all of Omniverse. And I say 2, technically it's only like 1 appearance and a cameo, and then another cameo, but we'll get there too. Her first appearance in Omniverse is in the episode Rules of Engagement. I know this is going to come off as very petty of me, but this is one of my absolute least favorite Omniverse episodes because just, oh my god, the way they handle this is so fucking terrible. Okay, let's get on with it. To make the description of this episode very brief, Luma Redwind wants to marry Ben, and is doing so forcefully. Both Julie and Esther end up getting dragged along with Ben in this adventure as well. The episode, when you don't think of that scene in mind, is actually pretty good, but when you bring up that scene, it becomes complete dog shit to me, I'm sorry. To me, this is probably the most disrespectful moment that Julie has. I know Duped might be the more objectively disrespectful moment, but the thing is like, this episode I feel like is so out of character, I just cannot stand it. This episode finally establishes Ben and Julie breaking up. So you're probably asking, how do they do it? Maybe they mutually agree that their lives clash and they're better off as friends. Oh, do I wish that was the case. So, in case you don't know, this is how the breakup happens. Ben is playing fucking video games, and then Julie calls him, and instead of like pausing the game, which is probably not an online match, or you know, if it was an online match, just wait until after the match and be like, oh sorry, I was occupied. Ben picks up and isn't paying attention as Julie asks him about going to the next level. And Ben is just raging at the game, and Julie mistakes it for him raging at her, and then basically Ben accidentally breaks up with her. This shit is so bad that bro, when I was recording this shit, I literally had to go out of my room and be like, fuck that, I'm gonna watch One Piece while I'm fucking recording this episode because I could not stand this scene. I'll never forget when my sister finally watched this episode, and she was enraged when this happened. It was like watching someone having to put their fucking dog down. Also, funny coincidence, but I won an art raffle at the same time of watching this episode with my sister, so I requested the artist to do Julie, and I'm very excited to see when it's finally done. There are 2 main issues I have with this breakup besides the fact that it's fucking lazy as shit. For starters, the miscommunication here is astronomically stupid. There is no way in hell you're gonna tell me that Julie would assume that like, oh, this is just normal and I just got dumped. No, like clearly Ben is acting fucking stupid, so wouldn't you question it at all? And Ben, for the love of God, pay the fucking attention. The other thing is the out of character part I mentioned. Julie feels out of character here. Ben being stupid, fine, whatever, he could be a real dumbass. But Julie, you have a backbone. You put your foot down. I'm not saying you should disrespect someone's boundaries, but at the very least, shouldn't you question something? There are 2 saving graces of this episode at the very least. The first thing is Julie comes to Ben's defense when her new boyfriend criticizes him.
That Ben is the stinker. If it were not for him...
You know, Hervé, Ben never asked to be a hero, but at the end of the day, he does a lot of good. so cut him a break.
And the other is the fact that Ben and Julie at the very least agree to still be friends, which, you know, at least there's that. But that breakup scene is so bad and so out of character, and this won't be the only time that Julie's out of character in Omniverse, as her second and only real other appearance is in the Most Dangerous Game show. Now, this episode really sucks, but I don't have time to be talking about why. Like, listen, look at how long this video is already. But the point is that Julie here does nothing, which is so crazy to me. If this is supposed to be an episode about Ben's love interest, why the fuck is the most notable one not doing shit? She doesn't have a single line, and she's also competitive, and yet she doesn't give a fuck to compete here, or at least help Ben out in this situation. Like, how do you not understand how Julie is? Like, who wrote this episode? And oh my god, no. I refuse to believe this was Yuri Lowenthal. This must have been his evil twin, Yowie Hyenthal. The only other appearance Julie has is a Blink and You'll Miss It cameo. In the episode And Then There Was Ben, there's a picture of her that Ben is stepping on. I just know the writers must have had some sort of hate boner for Julie, and this is more evident because of one fact that really pisses me off. This is out of show to be fair, but still, like, there's no reason for this shit. On a Q&A with Matt Wayne, someone asks if Julie still has feelings for Ben, and then Matt says yes, but she also has her own life. Like, is that supposed to be like, is that supposed to be empowering? Like, oh, you know, she's mature, she has her own, like, why does she still have feelings for him? Like, why would you do that to her? Like, she already got done dirty enough, and now you gotta give her, like, an unrequited, like, harboring feelings for Ben? What the fuck is wrong with you? Exaggeration aside, I just feel like that's so unnecessary, but whatever, that sucks. And that's it for the end of Julie in terms of Ben 10. Julie started out as a pretty cool character with a lot of personality and dimension to her. She was a really great supporting character and had a lot of nice dynamics and also development, but later down the road would become very toxic in a bad relationship with Ben and done dirty because of a lazy breakup scene. On one hand, I'm kind of glad Julie didn't get too much Omniverse time because, let's be honest, when Omniverse wrote love scenes, they're all pretty terrible. But on the other, I still would have loved to see Julie. Out of every character, she's my absolute favorite, honestly. There are still plenty of Ben 10 fans who are still pretty salty about the fact that Julie got done dirty. And you may be asking why they split Ben and Julie up. Well, I don't know how 100% this is, but I believe it's because of a pop-up fact in Ken 10, which says that Ben and Kai were meant to be. Kai is an Omniverse, but every scene with her and Ben, with the exception of like a sentence, I shit you not, has abysmal writing. They took away a relationship that had a lot of great development and crammed down our throats a relationship that was forced, rushed, and the only reason this ship is supposed to happen was because of fate. I could go more into detail about Kai, but I don't feel like it, and this video is not about her, it's about Julie. But all you need to know is that Ben and Kai is a very rushed, poor relationship. But I want to know your thoughts. Do you agree that Julie was done dirty and was a pretty cool character who deserved better? Or do you not really care about Julie? As always, I appreciate you guys for stopping by, and happy night hunting.